So the first thing always is to talk about it. Isolating is the one thing your eating disorder is going to want you to do. Relapse really happens when multiple slips happen. To feed that voice, to keep feeding that impulse, to keep using symptoms is what the eating disorder is going to want you to do.
When you're in recovery, you need a treatment team to educate you and to keep you accountable. And that's why it's really important to have a specialist for eating disorders so they can point out when you're acting in your eating disorder, not even necessarily using symptoms, but doing things that Ed would maybe want you to do.
The other piece is there's no shame in slips, and that is why it's so important to talk about it, because it does happen, whether it starts with an urge or it actually manifests into a behavior.
In retrospect, I saw my slip coming. One of the first things I did after my slip was try to approach all the things that were stressing me out. And that's such a hard thing to do because it's very overwhelming, especially if you've been avoiding it for some time. So I drew myself a plate and I used my colorful markers. I colored different portions of the plate and I started writing all the things that have been stressing me out, and some were really easy: schoolwork, work life, taking care of 2 dogs, cleaning the house, things like that. And then other things were really hard to admit, like the fact that I've been drinking more and I've been having a hard time getting into the shower.
Not everybody can express themselves through the written word. Not everybody can express themselves speaking it. Art is a great way, and you don't have to be an artist.
As I wrote all those things down, all those feelings, all those emotions, all those tasks, I realized my plate is literally overflowing. And that was when I realized, okay, this is why I had the slip. I allowed all of this to build up, and I haven't been using any kind of self-care.
That wasn't on your life plate. No,
not
it's
at
true.
all. No.
And we talk about the life plate all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, that is really a metaphor. If everything on your plate is something that has you up to here, what's going to happen? Restriction often plays out, and people maybe isolate and sort of swallow emotions, go inward and not talk about things. Where people who struggle with bulimia, there's a tendency to pile too much on and deal with too much and putting too much on your plate. And that's why it's really important to always be in a therapeutic process when you are going through recovery, so that you can uncover those themes.
You always have to approach your uncomfortable emotions, because the eating disorder is really good at avoiding those emotions.
Why are these urges coming up? Why am I having these thoughts? What do I need to do? What worked? What used to work before? And that's where it's important to kind of go back into your treatment, your toolbox. What were the coping skills that actually worked? And talking about it is the first step.
Those are things like body preoccupation, food preoccupation, fear of weight gain, negative self-talk, things like that.
When the plate is full, it's going to be harder to just push away those thoughts.
The thoughts pop up and I feel like I've always had them, but I was able to ignore them or brush them off and say, okay, that's just Ed, that's stupid, I'm not listening. And then when I wasn't taking care of myself, that's when I was feeding into it and listening to him. So the thoughts are always there. It's just about the degree to which they affect you changing based on your stressors.
The longer you're in recovery, the less intense, the less frequent I think those thoughts are, but you always have to be mindful, because you can be in recovery for a long time and perfect storm can culminate.
I didn't feel like I can lessen the stress at work, and I didn't feel like I could, manage what was going on in my household, and just everything seemed so out of control. What's scarier? Having anxiety over something that you can't control, like life, or looking in the mirror and thinking you're fat? That you can say, okay, the solution is to obsess over that, whereas over here is life plate and you don't know where to start. In retrospect, you didn't get rid of any of your stressors, you just added another problem.
Those are the pieces that you want to step back and reflect on, and that will help you figure out why you may have had the slip, so that moving forward you can work on coping skills so that it doesn't happen again. What happens when we just are living our lives and, you get caught up in the daily stressors of things and you end up in a situation where there's been a slip or relapse, is you do have to go back to what what was working, what worked before. And sometimes that really does require short-term intention, making sure that you're intentionally present. It's almost like playing the piano. If you're a piano player and you just become a natural at it, you just play the keys. But the minute you make a mistake, you got to pause and you have to think about the music and you start playing again. You're listening to the tune and you are diligent and you're intentional.
It's like driving too.
It's like driving too. Absolutely. If you're zoning out and then all of a sudden, like an animal runs in front of you, you're going to catch yourself, and you have to be intentional about putting both hands on the wheel. Getting back into recovery is putting both hands back on the wheel.
Even though during my stress builds up, I have been walking my dogs, but I haven't always been there wanting to get through the walk as quickly as I can to get home to do something else. And now I am intentionally there with my dogs, and they're becoming a source of self-care. I spoke about not wanting to get into the shower. I brought shower products and nice smelling soaps and things that will motivate me to want to spend time on my body and on myself, and approaching that aspect of myself as well. I might not be able to lessen the stressors in my life, but every time I feel that knot of anxiety, instead of shoving it down and ignoring it, I take out my journal and I start just writing. It doesn't even have to be a lot. It can be a sentence or two. What is it that I'm feeling? What exactly is making me anxious? And is there a solution? And sometimes the solution is just talking about it. There's a few supports that they know now that I've had a slip, so they're checking on me a little bit more. I'm checking in with myself a little bit more.
And it may require you to go back to being more intentional with your meals just for a period of time until you get back into a rhythm, making sure that you're diligent about when you eat, how you eat.
I'm going back to my treatment meal plans. I'm just going to do it for as long as I have to.
Once you've identified that you've slipped or you've relapsed, it's important to talk about it, as we said. Absolutely bring it up in your therapy, bring it up to your nutritionist. It's important for your treatment team to know what's going on so that they can help you navigate through that process. If you're not in a therapeutic process, it might be helpful to return even for a few sessions, or to rely on the people in your life that you've recruited to be your support. But if you've fallen backwards and you've had a couple of times where you've slipped and it's turned into a relapse, it's probably a good idea to go back to what you know. As scary as it is, there's no shame in slipping, there's no shame in the relapse.